So, Paul, why don't we start with you telling me a little bit about your study career thus far, because I know it's quite a varied story.
It certainly is. Yeah. My adventures in psychology began way back 1969.
Right.
Did first year psych at Uni New South Wales.
Yep.
Went on to become a science teacher.
Right.
Didn't touch psychology until after 17 years of high school science teaching, thought I'll change my career. Came back 1991.
Yep.
4-year part-time at Charles Sturt Uni at Bathurst.
Yep.
And went out as a self-employed psychologist for the next 20 or so years.
Right.
And I'm back here as a full-time lecturer at UOW.
Right. So, Paul, tell us, when you were science teaching, what made you think, I'd like to go back and study psychology?
In the 17 years, 12 years was absolutely enjoyable. Last 5 years, the word that comes to mind, miserable, borderline depression. So I went and did this course. It was run by a pretty famous clinical psychologist, and I didn't think much of her teaching skills.
Right.
And I thought, I could do something like that.
Right.
So here I go. I'm looking around, and I found you could do distance education at Charles Sturt University. And so I stayed 1 year as a teacher, and then I quit that and did 3 years being a trainer with House with No Steps, working with adults with intellectual disabilities.
Right. So tell us your studies in psychology. Tell us what you think they've brought you in terms of your working career.
I wouldn't have a career except for psychology.
Right.
I've had so many different areas that I've worked in. So when I got my honours degree, it was social science at Charles Sturt. I took myself in as a job. I couldn't call myself a sports psychologist, so they called me the mental skills trainer with Balmain Rugby League Club, the Tigers.
Right.
I stayed with them for 8 years. After about 3 years, I was a registered psychologist, and there was no restrictions in those days, so I was the sports psychologist. I wouldn't have had a career. And then my successes got spread around. You have to network when you're running your own business. I ended up working with New South Wales Cricket, New South Wales Netball. Again, without psychology, no money coming in the door.
Yeah, right. So tell us, I'm sure the students would be interested in that, sports psychology. What did you do when you worked for Balmain?
I was their mental skills coach. That was a technical term because, again, the legalities of registration only in New South Wales at the time.
Sure.
What I did was mental skills training. I taught myself a lot of things, everything from self-hypnosis. I'd have sessions with the teams before they'd go out, before games, in the dressing room, one-on-one coaching. I'd sit in the dressing room and listen to the coach and give the coach for all that time was Wayne Pearce, who was a legendary player.
Right.
And I would come back and tell him things I heard, and he considered me his extra set of eyes and ears.
Right.
But then one-on-one, I was the only psychologist working with a rugby league club out of 16 clubs.
Right.
Ongoing.
Okay.
I was there 3, 4, 5 days a week. Depended.
So what do you think you brought the club that they valued?
Resilience. I was credited with that we're a club with not spending a lot of money. In rugby league, you had caps and we couldn't spend more than $2 million. Other clubs, we found out, were spending $10 million.
Right.
So we had players that weren't the stars. Balmain built up a reputation, and the coach gave me some credit. The players did, that when they got flogged, instead of giving up the ghost, and they would often come back and win the next game. So it was always the big Balmain comeback.
Right,
that's part of the psychological skills that I was teaching them.
Right. So tell me, in terms of your study of psychology, how did that help you when you were working with the sports psychology?
Not much.
Okay.
Well, I should qualify that. I didn't get taught, I wasn't taught any sports psychology. There's only 2 universities in Australia that you can do a sports psychology degree that lends you to being a sports psychologist. And there's only 90 of them in Australia. I'm no longer considered one. But what it did was, my honours year, I went and measured optimism in 300 rugby league players. So I had all these different rugby league clubs that I approached, and one of them was coached by Wayne Pearce, who was very open-minded. After I got my degree, I approached him. Again, you got to network, you got to sell yourself. He put me on as their mental skills coach. So, yes, the degree with my honours, doing the research, that opened the door at the Tigers and then other places.
Right. So you did that for a long time, sports psychology, and what happened after that?
Well, from 95 to 2001, and the coach, so much is linked with my good friend Wayne Pearce.
Yeah.
He stopped being the coach of the West Tigers in 2001, and he said to me, Smithy, look at the business world. There's so much more opportunities, and that's where he's working now. Has his own training company. So from 2001 to when I came back to uni here, 2008, I was running my own business doing corporate training. So much of the same things I was doing in sport, team building, resilience, stress busting, communication.
Right.
I did in the corporate world, lots more clients.
Right. So you never did a particular unit at university that was business or corporate psychology?
I did a one-semester unit in my honours on organisational side.
Oh, okay.
All the rest I taught myself.
Okay.
Go to read, talk to people.
Right.
That's how I built up my profile.
Right. So one of the things that maybe you learnt in your degree was about, researching and reading.
Definitely, yes. In those days, this is pre-internet.
Yes.
So if you wanted an article, sometimes it would take 2 weeks to be photocopied.
Sure.
There was no getting on the computer. Finding out how to find information and then share it with people.
Yeah, right. Okay. And what about skills in terms of communication? Do you think that your psychology degree taught you anything in that way?
Again, I'm not trying to be cynical, but getting out in the world and practicing, I probably learnt more about communication in the 3 years I was with House with No Steps, because I was the trainer of adults with intellectual disabilities, IQ of 75 or less, and I was there like a mentor. You learn so much about life.
Right.
I'd learned a lot being a school teacher, but wow, this was big different.
Yeah, right. So tell me how you plan to bring those skills that you learnt in your everyday life to an undergraduate degree in psychology at University of Wollongong.
Well, right now I'm the coordinator for Psych 121, first year foundations, and I'm pulling in more and more applied areas where we can see how psychology is used in every day, taking it out of the textbook. I think I'm trying to liven up the tutorials that way, so the students, right from day one, when they walked in, the first exercise in the tutorial was strength spotting, looking at their own strengths and then building it up from there.
Yeah, right. Okay. So tell us what you would say to a student. This is kind of a video for students who are in their undergraduate degree thinking about planning their careers, maybe wanting to get into maybe a clinical master's or something, but maybe they don't have the marks or the experience.
Be prepared to go in all different directions. There are so many surprises and there's so many opportunities. Like I've gone from sport to corporate. I did counselling. It's who you meet and what you learn from people. Psychology is ginormous, and then you can change. You can go back to doing. I did sports psychology, but then I'd be doing actual clinical counselling with people. So the skills keep overlapping.
Right. So it sounds like you've been learning your whole life, in a way.
Well, I've just got my PhD awarded, and I'm 62.
Oh, congratulations!
So that's, and I tell my students that I do lectures. I'm also the coordinator of psychology of physical activity and health. And I tell them, and I tell my other first-year students, it's never too late to learn or go on a new career pathway.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. I think that's all we need.
It's been a pleasure, Rebecca.
Thank you.